So for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Mind Bicycle, where we're going to talk about AI, telepathy, and what's going to happen in the future. So, we were just talking about how in the future, people are probably going to need to be working on clearing their minds because the friction between having a desire and making it real is going to be reduced by actually having clarity and knowing what you want. And that's the only way you're going to be able to actually communicate your desires to an AI. But the most important part of that is that in the future, people are probably going to be using telepathy to actually express their desires. So we just want to dive into that.
It sounds like right now we have this clunky language. We speak in these word symbols that is this clunky expression of ideas, and it takes a long time to communicate an idea. But you're saying there's technology that's evolving, that's going in the direction of thought to manifestation, as opposed to communication through these weird clunky verbal cues, but thought manifest.
Exactly. Yeah, it takes a lot of power to go from like a thought in your mind to moving your mouth around, and you got people who sometimes they stutter, they get nervous. Like even public speaking is hard. Even doing this is kind of hard. Um, but it is really interesting because a lot of technologists and companies in general, I think, have recognized this vision for the future, and they're trying to move things in this direction. Like Meta in this past week released a study saying they put this mech uh, device on somebody's head, which was just like it's kind of like an MRI, but not quite the same. It's a different type of measurement device, and they were able to measure people uh, typing on a keyboard. They were able to actually predict which letters they were going to type correctly 80% of the time. Uh, and that's not that useful, but it's obviously uh, an indicator of the direction they're trying to do or trying to go. It's a stepping stone to.
Hmm. Yeah, and we'll link the that study below in the description. But it sounds like again we're coming to this place of more telepathy or tapping into these ideas that thoughts are also vibrations, just like anything else. Okay, uh, atoms, electrons, everything is this wave that's coming into existence and going out of existence. And we can pick up on lots of these at the physical level, but as it gets more subtle on the quantum level, and the atomic level, it's more difficult to pick up on. So thoughts are these most subtle forms that maybe are difficult to find or to pick up on, and we can start to pick up on them in the brain now.
Yeah. And it's not even just like pure thoughts. Like there's other studies where they're able to measure images in people's minds, like things that people are visualizing or even things that people are seeing. They're able to actually extract that image back out
Gotcha.
and kind of predict what it is they're seeing. So it is kind of interesting to think about how that's going to open up different means of communication in the future. Like we could be sitting here, and maybe not only could the device read from our heads, but maybe it could project images into our heads. So if I'm just sitting next to you, I could just be thinking of a giraffe and send you a giraffe in my head, and then you just have like a giraffe pop into your head.
It didn't work.
Well, you probably thought of a giraffe, didn't you?
After you said it,
Okay.
before you said something, I was trying to be like, okay, what image is he sending me?
Oh.
We'll have to put this to the test. But I'm still curious of how this is actually working in these MRI studies. Like, are they picking on the neurochemical signals? Is it a certain part of the brain they're looking at, or how are they actually deciphering the image of the word just through scans and images? It's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think part of this really is like they're majorly measuring like sensory input in a sense. Like the if you're showing somebody an image of an animal, then you can measure what their brain waves look like for that animal, and kind of like take an average, and you can train a neural net to start to understand and predict these patterns. Like, okay, when a human brain is viewing an elephant, this is what their brainwaves look like. And when they're viewing a car, this is what their brainwaves look like. And you can sort of start to get like a general idea of how people's brains respond and
I gotcha.
interpret signals.
So maybe it's a certain pattern of signals in the brain that usually leads to this kind of image being produced. And this pattern of brain circuitry signifies giraffe,
Yes,
something like that.
exactly. Say Max is viewing a giraffe. Probably.
So what you're saying is there might be a certain space in the brain where giraffes live.
Yeah, somewhere in latent space is what they call it. And I think that's what they did even with that typing study. They probably spent a lot of time just measuring people's brain signals while they were typing certain letters, and then they were able to take new people and then measure and see what the characters they were typing were, and they got 80% accuracy on that. So there was
Hmm.
some commonality in thought to motor muscle signal to a certain letter.
Okay. Okay. So what might that new telepathic device look like? You mentioned earlier like a headband or something like that that could help with this telepathic communication of ideas.
Yeah,
Is there any prototypes or anything?
there is a band from a company called Prophetic, which I think is really interesting. They're doing like a lot of, uh, I think, interesting kind of experiments with it. Where they're doing like almost like, I think it's some kind of like they're doing like a kind of wave, like 3D waveform action with it, where they're able to project these waves into your brain and they're able to get certain kind of stimulations going.
Uh,
The main focus of their headband is to stimulate lucid dreaming. The idea is that when you're asleep, they could detect it when your brain is hitting just the right state where if they send in this stimulation, it will put you into a lucid dream.
okay. So this sounds like stimulation, though. It doesn't sound like communication of imagery, but rather stimulation.
Yeah, and I think that is a stepping stone to that, where you stimulate in this imagery.
Hmm.
Um, like,
I see
so
what you're saying.
it may be like they'll be able to read your mind and you can send messages to other people.
Okay.
But if to receive, it can maybe put the image
Okay.
in
Okay.
through stimulation.
So what still needs to be worked on is that receptive aspect. So we can maybe program the brain in certain ways, and this is neurofeedback, and basically a neurofeedback headband that stimulates a certain part of the brain. But now we have to develop technology where the receiving information comes in from the other headband outside of that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I don't know how long it's gonna take. I've got a pre-order in for one of these headbands. I want to be the first to experiment, but
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
because essentially, if somebody has something as simple as ADHD, you could stimulate a part of the brain that helps with ADHD. Think of the implications for mental health care. If someone's maybe depleted in a way, in terms of depression, that part of their brain isn't as active. They could stimulate that part of the brain that maybe elicits joy
Yeah.
or a connection with other people to get them out of that depressive phase. This has major implications for mental health and psychiatry.
Yeah, and there is a company, I think it's called Neurology, that there's no way that's the name for it. Maybe it's like a play on words where it's like like neurology but spelled differently.
Gotcha.
But they're making a headband as well that is supposed to be targeted specifically for ADHD. Some people have tried it. They say it's like digital Adderall, but without like the bad effects. So there are really promising developments in this whole area.
And again, even low level neurofeedback that we use in the office at the moment, it just helps you focus. Okay, bring your attention back to these sounds. When your brain drifts, it brings you back to that sound. And you do that over and over and over, and then that increases your focus. But this stuff that you're talking about, it goes a step further to directly stimulate a part of the brain, it sounds like, as opposed to just giving a sound to you and telling you to redirect your own focus.
Right.
That brings up a concern for me is if is it kind of like a prescription medication? Should we rely on something outside of us to do that stimulation for us when we know we can do it. In the case of ADHD, we can redirect our focus by ourselves and get similar results.
Right. Well, there are a lot of people who seem like they can't, and that's why they take the medicine, right?
Uh,
I mean, it's not like they can't, but they just really struggle with it. Like, someone with ADHD might struggle to maintain any habit in general. Uh, so that's why taking the Adderall is like just simple enough of a habit that they're able to do it.
it gets them back on track so they know what the feeling of focus is like. So they grow that part of the brain and they can do it on their own.
Exactly. And like if that person with severe ADHD were able to meditate for 30 minutes or an hour every day, like maybe they wouldn't need the prescription medicine at all, but they're probably in that spot because they're not able to do it.
That brings us to an interesting conversation, and from my point of view, then do we need the technology if we can do this on our own and we have the ability to? There's kind of this split between maybe the scientific realm and going down the route of technology and increasing technological development and maybe brain chips and things like that to stimulate these parts of the brain, or this route of maybe what the yogis did thousands of years ago and use the brain as itself as this technology in of itself, and we can learn how to master the brain and body just through our own natural technologies.
It's a good question, and I think
That's a big one.
it's a big one. And I think part of the center of that is, it's kind of like going to the gym, like somebody who's lifting weights naturally and just like taking their protein and creatine and natural supplements versus someone who's taking a bunch of steroids. Um, it's kind of like that. And there's a lot of potential adverse effects, like you're not getting that muscle naturally. Or even
So there is like a reliance on it in some way. It can show the potential, but then you're reliant on that thing.
right. Although I guess even if you're doing steroids, you do at least gain the muscle at a minimum.
Correct.
On some level it's kind of like somebody who is using a mechanized suit versus someone who is actually going and lifting weights themselves. Like, okay, you can put on your mech suit and you can lift 500 pounds when you're wearing the suit,
Right.
but then when you don't have the suit on, you're like a lost, confused person.
That's like testosterone replacement therapy, though. People take TRT and then they can't produce testosterone on their own. But if they can't produce testosterone on their own anyway, then they take TRT to help them with that.
Right. I guess the danger is if this becomes like a sort of super stimulant, where it's like even like if you can focus well on your own, like suddenly the only way you can compete is if you have like super focus.
Uh, Elaborate. What do you mean?
Well, it's just like, pretend everyone in the world suddenly has Adderall, every single person, and they're all able to be like super disciplined and super focused and get everything they need done all the time, 12 hours a day, 16 hours a day maybe. And now you are on the market just trying to compete with them for everything. Uh, it creates some pretty intense dynamics, and suddenly everybody's going to need their mental mech suit. They're going to put on the headband and, you know, lock in as long as possible.
This seems like it's driving competition a bit. Okay, we can produce more technology that potentially helps humanity, but that also brings up an issue for me, which is okay, maybe there are some ethical implications and overall psychological maturity that we should go through as a human species and as individuals before we really tap into the power of these types of technologies.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always the question of like, are we uh mature enough spiritually for whatever technology we've created? But I don't know if that is the right order of progression because were we mature enough spiritually for the nuclear bomb when we invented it. No. But its existence forced us to grow in some ways. Like it forced us to really deal with concepts of oblivion. They were not just abstract things that God might one day strike down upon us.
I,
This is something that we could bring upon ourselves at any minute of any day, should we
I
choose.
see. So you're saying the technology is forcing maturity in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's possible because when it's actually there and you're forced to stare it in the face, it kind of does do
Very much.
that.
Be going back to the original topic of telepathy, if the world around us knows our thoughts, then that means we have to be very in control of our thoughts and know what we're thinking so we're not sending all these bad thoughts to the people around us. That puts a lot of self responsibility there.
Yeah. Now, I talked to one business executive who I was telling him about this idea, and he got very concerned because we were at a bar and he was saying, well, that bartender, she has big tits. What if she could hear me say that in my mind? It's like, well, you gotta clear up your mind, man.
That's that maturity aspect. Okay, that technology may be forcing us down that route of maturity because yeah, we can't let our sexual impulses or our more fear drives or anything like that to run out of control. We
Right,
can't let that happen anymore.
right. It's taking control of our mental
Faculty.
world, yeah, our mental faculty, our mental world, just like how we have to control our animal body in public. You can't just fart loudly around people. I'm sure in the past you could do that all the time, and I mean, I still do it out in public, but only amongst good friends. At a fancy restaurant, you cannot just go and do that. But that is something that we had to learn. It was
Correct.
a maturation of ourselves. And if you're sitting there thinking, wow, that waitress has really big boobs, you're just thinking it and then it's being broadcast out into the world, and then she can hear you, that's going to be like the equivalent of like a mental fart. Like, you do not do that. So people are going to have to be able to control that.
Control your mental farts.
Yes.
Okay. That's funny.
You
This is what the world is coming to. Control your mental farts.
hear that, people? Because we hear you.
Can't hide anymore. We all hear each other. It's part of it's this ever emerging collective consciousness that's growing more intertwined as the days go on. And we're deeply, deeply interconnected, and now it's becoming on even more subtle levels.
Yeah, and on so many levels at the same time. Like, there's even like two things I want to touch on with that. Like, one thing AI is doing is it's unifying all knowledge across the entire world, and the whole world is putting all of their thoughts and knowledge and information about themselves out on the entire internet. It's become this giant collective knowledge base, but now we have these AI tools that can scour all this information at once and unify it and connect it in the ways it thinks are best and most interesting. So that is like there's a unifying happening there. Um, but also even in the ways people are communicating now, like Gen Z and whatnot, we were talking about that this morning. Like
Mm,
they don't like to even like speak verbally a lot of times. Like they prefer to be texting all the time or
huh,
communicating through their phones silently.
that's telepathy in a way.
Yeah,
Wow. And then we were talking about those telepathy tapes earlier on as well.
yeah,
And there might be even kids, people out there that can use telepathy already without the technologies. And these are bringing up some very psychedelic questions, some very mystical questions. Uh, yeah, the world's going in a very strange direction, a very interesting direction.
yeah. Just taking that in for a moment.
What's next, Gabe?
Well, I think that it is going to be a collective evolution because there's going to be economic pressures, like all these drives and maybe even like just social status pressures at the same time. Because even if AI comes about and takes everybody's jobs, um, one thing that will not go away is status, seeking status,
Uh,
competing for it.
like a drive for power.
Yeah,
But
because I mean, status is zero sum. Like there always has to be somebody at the top, somebody who's like the most revered, most respected. Um, and so people are always going to feel that. They're going to feel their positions in these status hierarchies, and they are still going to continue to compete for these zero sum positions. Whereas, like the abundance provided by AI is very material. It's not zero sum. Everybody benefits, but then you have to find new ways to compete on status. And one of those things might be, mental fitness, mental clarity. Um, the other ones might be, physical fitness. Um, don't know exactly how it will all go. It's very hard to see how it's going to shake out.
it's fascinating. It's almost like we're going back, and I think about this a lot, to Greek Lyceum days where you see these old statues of ancient Greek people that were very into taking care of their bodies and refining their bodies, and then refining their mental faculties as well through philosophy and critical thinking. I hope that's what we're going back to.
One of those Greek philosophers said something about how it's a shame for a man to go his life and not see what he would be like in his peak physical fitness.
Yeah, exactly. So
Pull
now
that up, Jamie. That's okay.
now we can get back to that. Truly, we don't have to be as in this rat race, maybe that a lot of people are anymore. We can take a step back, and this is obviously utopian thinking. This is the best possible scenario of it. Let the technology do some of it for us and allow us to be more creative and be more constructive, build our bodies, build our minds, and connect with each other.
Yes, although I think there are going to be like super users, like AI super users, who are going to have like super clear minds, and they're going to be like almost like super executives, where they are just like sitting there, just commanding armies of agents to go out and like build entire companies for them or build entire ideas for them, um, from start to finish. And yeah, having the clarity to command and manage in that way is going to be very important.
Wow. Okay. So that goes back to the original focus concept. These people that are maybe at this higher level of status can be so focused that they're commanding whole companies and organizations through their level of focus.
Right, exactly. Like if you look at the today's top executives in the world, like people are going to have to like kind of operate at that level potentially. But they are probably going to have more tools that are going to enable them to bring them to that space if
Hmm,
they actually have the drive for it.
I see. You're making me really want to get an Apple Watch, man. We are not sponsored by Apple.
Let me see if I can shine it right into the camera. No, I can't.
uh,
I'm shining the light right on your face. There we go, right on your chin.
because it can be so efficient, though. Again, it's straight from thought to getting stuff done in the technological world, which I have appointments to solidify, and I have to put that stuff in my calendar, and I have notes to type. But if I get to the point where I can just speak them out loud into my watch, and then that automatically goes to my computer, then the AI knows the direction to take all of it, then man, that would be easy. It would cut my time, and yeah, I would get so much more time. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a huge value add.
Correct. All right. How do we want to wrap this up?
I don't know. Maybe we should spread a message of peace and love to the world. You guys all need to start meditating a whole lot, or not. You can just chill, but it'd probably be beneficial to you to start clearing your mind.
Since the technology is not here yet, where that cognitive stimulation isn't there, we do have tools like meditation and neurofeedback tools that can enhance your focus. So if we're going into this route that's thought to other people, telepathy, then we ultimately need to take control of our minds and our thoughts, and that can be done through things like meditation. Meditate and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was the Mind Bicycle. This is Max Combs, licensed mental health counselor.
Intern. I have a master's degree.
He's a professional. And I'm Gabe, AI engineer.
AI Jesus
AI Jesus.
is what they call him.
Peace.